Hello lovely people, I'm K3N and welcome to my channel. In this video I'm just going to share a little bit about my process in making a Japanese rice bag using Indian inspired embroidery. So a fusion rice bag if you like. It's not a tutorial as such, I'm just going to talk through how I do it. So I'm staying with my friend who's travelled a lot in India, and she's got a lot of Indian books about Indian embroidery, Indian textiles and so on, and she also had these fabulous block prints. Can you see that? And this elephant just really attracted me. I just think it's wonderful. So I wanted to use this as the base for my embroidery. You may not have this, chances are you haven't, but you can look online for Indian inspired embroidery motifs, or you can look in any books you may have, you know, or if you're confident at drawing you could sketch something similar. But I had this block print, so I inked it and I printed it onto a piece of paper. So obviously it came out the other way around. And then I traced it. It wasn't really necessary to trace it. I don't know why I did. I think I just wanted to clean up some of the lines and just make it a bit clearer. So I traced it onto tracing paper, but copy paper would equally have worked. And went over it with a really dark felt tip pen, so that when I put my cloth over it I could see through it. And then, I've done 4 big elephants for the sides of the bag, and then I wanted to do a little elephant. In fact, my friend who I'm staying with at the moment said, you need a little elephant. So I put him through the photocopier and shrunk him down by about 50%, I think, to get this little version. And I've traced that onto the cloth for the bottom of the bag. I'll show you that in a second. So once you've got this and you've got really dark, clear lines for your design, then I took my piece of cloth and I took it, let me get the one for the bottom, which is a dark purple. I didn't have enough of the pink. So I took even this dark cloth. Can you see the little baby elephant? So I took the template, and I put it behind, making sure he was facing the right way. If you wanted him to face the other way, you could just turn over and trace, you see, the dark through to the back. Trace over it with a black pen, but I wanted him that way. So I put some masking tape just to hold him in place, just here and here, and then I went to the sunniest window in the house, the brightest window, and I masking taped the 2 corners to the window, and then using a soft pencil I just traced over the lines. So now I've got my motif on the cloth there. And when I'd done that, because I don't like to use an embroidery hoop, and I wanted to make sure the tension as I stitched was reasonable, you'll see in a minute I've not been entirely successful, I then basted my square. So now I'm going to jump to this bigger square. This is one of the sides. I basted it using the invisible base stitch, little stitch on the front and big stitch on the back, to just a piece of old sheet. So now it's a bit sturdier to stitch. So this is how it looked once I'd traced him onto the cloth. All these lines are on the other side of the cloth. It's a scrap of old cloth that's been printed and whatever. But I like the look of it. It kind of had an old feel about it to me. So I've done 3. Well, no, I've nearly finished 3. This one, I chose 4 colours of floss, which I haven't got here. I chose green, gold, red and blue, and a dark and a light of each one. So this one, the first one, I hope the mirror's not winking at you, I did green for the main body. I outlined it in a slightly dark green. You see that a lot in Kutch inspired embroidery, that they outline or they use multiple shades of the same colour. Sometimes, Chrissy says, sometimes they obviously have run out and it just changes halfway, but often you see it very deliberately, so it might be outlined in the dark green and then filled in the lighter green. And all his body is just regular chain stitch, but crammed up really one row against the other to give a really dense effect. And then these lines here around his blanket and his bracelets, actually it's a she-elephant, around her bracelets and her neck and everything, are the open chain stitch or the ladder stitch. If you're not sure how to do those stitches, the Monday project was week 30 and it's called Kutch Inspired Embroidery and Shisha or something like that. You'll find it in the Slowstitch playlist. I'll put a link in the description. So first of all I did the chain stitch to outline the whole body, and then I went and did the ladder chain stitch everywhere, and then I went back and filled in all the green area of the elephant's body. And then for the eye, I did some satin stitch. It looks a bit strange at the moment, the eye, but I'm going to put a little black bead, and I've put a little black bead in place just to see how it looks, and it straight away brings it to life. So, you know, it looks a bit strange at the moment. I haven't put any of the beads on yet. I want to finish all the stitching first, because once the beads are on, you tend to catch your thread on them. So I'll put those on last. And then I put a little Shisha in the middle of his saddle blanket. She elephant. Why do I keep saying he? Her saddle blanket. And did the Shisha stitch around, which is in my video that I referred to. And the tail I also did a bit of satin stitch. So that's the green one. So then I did a red one. And just changed up the colours that I used, you know, for the different elements. And then I did a yellow one. And the last one I'm going to do in the blue. So I've got my 4 colours. So each elephant is one of the 4 colours, and then I've changed up this as well. So I'm going to go away and finish the 4th one, and I'm going to put do the little one. The little one, by the way, because she's so tiny. Because she's so tiny, I've simplified her. So instead of doing all the ladder chain and everything, I'm just going to do a different colour of chain stitch, I think, for the bracelets and to outline the saddle. Whether I put a teeny tiny Shisha on her or not, I don't know. It depends if I can find one small enough. But she's just going to be on the bottom of the bag, so that when you lift the bag up, you've got this little surprise. So I'll go and finish her, and I'll go and do the embroidery on this. And then I'll come back and talk through how I marked. You see, these are marked already for the border. And I'll do that after I've stitched, because it is pulling in a bit. So I didn't want to mark the border first in case it changed the size, if it pulls it in significantly, because all the panels will need to, be roughly the same size so they fit together. So I'll go away and do that, and then I'll come back with the next stage when I've got that far. Okay, so it's some weeks later. I filmed the first part of this video when I was staying with my friend, and now I'm in my new home. And I said, I watched it back to see what stage I got to with you, and I said that I'd show you how I marked up for the border. So I finished the stitching on 2 of the panels, Mrs. Green and Mrs. Gold. And it's very wonky. It's I did minimal marking, and then I did the rest by eye and freehand. So if you look at those 2, sorry, the Shishas are winking at you. If you look at these 2 side by side, you'll see that that's much smaller and denser, and that's much bigger. But that doesn't bother me. If you wanted to be more precise, then you could mark yourself little reference dots, for example, around there for your lazy daisies. But in the spirit of, if you look at Gujarat embroidery, a lot is done by hand, and all done by hand, but a lot is just done by eye. That's my rationale anyway. And actually, I just, I like it. I just like that lazy daisy's going slightly off wonky. To me, it's character, but you do you as always. So I finished the stitching on those 2, and I will talk you through that in a moment. This one, Mrs. Red, is already marked. I need to do Mrs. Blue. You see here, especially where the tail is, it's pulled in. I'll tell you the proper thing to do, which I haven't done, and I'm not going to do, would be to dampen it on the back, make it be flat, and pin it out on something, like some towels, or if you've got that foam stuff that knitters use for blocking. So dampen it with a spray or something, a spray bottle of water, and then pin it out and let it dry. Or dampen it and then iron it gently on the back, easing it into shape is a quicker way of doing it. But the stitching will sort it out. So my outer drawn line needs to be 7.5 inches. So I've got this, I'm sorry it's shiny, I've got this big quilter square, which is handy. If you didn't have a big quilter square, you could just get a normal ruler and measure 7.5 inches. And just eyeball your first 1/2 inch seam, and then just put little dots. Maybe I'll do it with a normal ruler, just to be fair to those of you who don't have the big square. So I'm just trying to get it sort of halfway, because my seam allowances are all over the place, to leave about the same either side. And then I'm going to draw a line from 7.5 all the way up to 0. This is just a soft normal pencil, it's a 4B, but you see it shows up quite well. And now you'd really want something to make sure you've got the right angle, so you could use, you know, your ruler should be a right angle. So you could lay your ruler back on like that and then just draw a little line to start you off. I mean, this is not going to be as perfect or accurate as using that big quilter square, but... And then the same thing again, 7.5 inches. And when you get to the end, if your last line's 7.5 inches, then you know your square. If it's not, then you can go back and adjust. I should actually be doing these lines more faintly so that I can do that. So if I go back to the beginning and measure up 7.5, in what I think is a straight line, and put a mark in that corner, and then go back here, you see I'm off by about 1/8 of an inch. So this line is a bit, it's coming in a bit. But do you know what? Cloth stretches, 1/8 of an inch between friends makes no difference. I'm going to split the difference. I'm going to make this line come, where am I? So it should come right out to here, do you see? To be 7.5. I hope you can see what I'm doing. But it's not, it's going to come here. And I'm going to rely on the forgiving nature of cloth to sort out that 1/8 of an inch. If you want to be more accurate, then the other thing you could do is make yourself a cardboard template of 7.5 inches square, and then you can, you know, fiddle about on your cardboard with your pencil and your ruler till you've got it dead square, and then use that as a template to draw around, or whatever size your rice bag is, you know, if it was 7.5. And if you made it out of sort of sturdy cardboard, like the back of a sketchbook or something, then you've got that template forever. I always then just write on the size of what it is, and, you know, and just keep them, because you never know when you want a 7.5 inch square again. So now I want 1/2 inch inside that line to create my chevron. So I'm just going to mark in a couple of places, 1/2 inch there and 1/2 inch up there somewhere. And I'm going to draw a line, but I'm going to, I hope my head's not coming in, but the thing is I can't see otherwise. I'm going to draw the other side of the ruler because it's beveled, it's easier. I'm not going to go all the way out to the edge because I need to leave room for my little shape, my little teardrop shape. So I'm just going to stop somewhere there, turn it, and sorry, measure again in a couple of places. So if you measure and mark in a couple of places your whatever width, in my case 1/2 inch, then it should mean when you connect those two dots that it's 1/2 inch all the way along. I've got a lumpy bit of embroidery. I've got the only cutting mat that's unpacked, which is this really lumpy and bumpy one, which has been left in the sun at some point. But you know, we'll manage. It'll all be alright in the end. Oops. So same thing there. Mark this. 1/2 inch. 1/2 inch. I think it's good every now and then. I mark the others up using my big square ruler, which is, you know, much easier. But it's, you know, it's good to challenge yourself every now and then, isn't it? With lumpy cutting mats. And so 2 marks. I've talked about it before, but I think a little bit that's why, particularly in, you know, the world of machine patchwork and quilting and so on, everybody's so I don't want to say hung up or whatever, but accuracy is so important. And I wonder whether accuracy was important, which is why the invention of all the stuff, or whether the invention of all the stuff enabled accuracy, so made accuracy more important. Anyway, and I've joined my things up there because I wasn't concentrating. So these little teardrops go into the corner, but bearing in mind this in principle is a stitching line, this outer drawn line. So I'm going to sit maybe 1/16 of an inch or so just inside that. And I'm just by eye putting it, you know, on the diagonal and drawing around it. I mean, you can come up with any kinds of border patterns you like, the principles are the same. But this is just a way to just put minimal reference points, you know, the rest becomes sort of slow stitchy because it's then more intuitive how you fit the stitches in the spaces and so on, rather than following drawn lines everywhere. It's just the way I like to work, you know. It's not the right way or the wrong way, it's just my way. So I'll just put these on. And then the final thing I'm going to do is mark the chevrons, which again you could do freehand if you wanted, but I've chosen to mark them. And I find that just a soft pencil, when I'm going to cover all the lines with stitching, it lasts long enough for me to stitch. It gradually wears off as I stitch. I don't have to use disappearing pens or anything, but if you've got disappearing pens and you want to use them, then you go for it. Right, so that's that. Okay, I did already film how I mark the chevrons, but when I watched it back it was confusing. So I'm going to mark this last line and edit that away and show you what I think is a more straightforward way. So my border is 7.5 inches. So the middle is at the 3 3/4 inch mark. So I'm going to put a dot on the inner line of my border. Your measurements might be different, but you know, find the centre. And then I've worked out that my chevrons need to be, the base of them need to be 7/8 of an inch apart. An inch was just too much. So again, along this inner line, I'm just going to mark, make little dots. I can't see what I'm doing. There we go. 7/8 of an inch every time. So I mark 7/8, I slide it back to the full inch on the dot, put the full inch on the dot, and then do 7/8 again. It's easier than counting eighths of inches. To there, and then back the other way. So I put this one back on a full inch on the dot, find 7/8, find 7/8, find 7/8. And I'm not right to the end, but you know, it doesn't matter. So my middle chevron points inwards like this. So then all I'm going to do is just eyeball halfway between the dots. I'm not drawing, I'm just using my pencil to find the middle underneath there. If you want to measure and do it that way, then you can, but I think, you know, on such a short run, eyeballing is good enough. So I've just eyeballed halfway and put a dot. And here I'm halfway between there and there, put a dot, halfway between there and there, put a dot, all the way along, halfway between those two dots, a dot, halfway between those two dots, a dot. And then I'm going to make all my lines going this way. So if I start at the middle to make sure my middle chevron goes in, this cutting mat's really not really fit for purpose anymore. So I'm just joining the dots under an angle, all going the same way. Saves turning the ruler back and forth. I think it's just easier. And then the last one's in the other direction. And then the same. So now I need to start here with this last dot, because I didn't put another chevron in, I just let it, look, do you see how it just sort of comes into the corner? Do you see? But obviously yours could be completely different, your measurements and everything. This is just really for the principle of it. So yeah, so I just do that all the way along, and that's all my chevrons marked. Okay, hope that's clear. Certainly clearer than the first time I explained it. Okay, the ladder chain stitch or open chain stitch. It's worked with 2 parallel lines. So on my elephants it was the bracelets, you know, which are just drawn as 2 parallel lines, and then I did the stitching in between. Now, because I wanted to start at the beginning of the row with a bar rather than it open at the end, I did an extra stitch. So I'll just show you, I've drawn a right angle as well, just to show you how I dealt with the right angle. So I'll start up here somewhere so it doesn't take me forever. In fact, why not start here? So you come through on the left hand of your 2 lines from the back, and I've got a knot in my thread. I've just got 2 bits just because it's, you know, I like stitching on 2 bits, like I think I keep saying. And then just go directly across and go down, and then come back up through the same hole where you started. So I'm just making 1 straight stitch across the 2 lines. And I've gone in between my 2 strands of floss, but you know, anyway, that's okay. So now to make the ladder chain proper, you want your thread away from you, and I find it easier to stitch north. You know, you'll have to experiment and see if you'd rather stitch west, you know what I mean, or any other direction. So then you go in through the right hand side of your line, so I'm going back into that same hole of that stitch there, and then you come out with your needle a little way along on your left hand line, however big you want those gaps to be that you're making, you know, in the open chain. So let's say about there. Now at this point it's important to make sure that your thread is around under your needle tip. So then you pull through, but not all the way through, and I think that is what certainly tripped me up in the beginning. So just leave the loop quite big. Do you see I'm in the loop, but I haven't snugged the loop up. Well, now I have because I moved it. And then you go down into the loop in a straight line across from where you came out there onto the drawn line on the right hand side, and then you come up again the same distance, and then you get hold of your tail, and at that point with your needle still through the cloth like that, then you can snug up that chain there. Just snug it up round the needle. Do you see? And then you repeat. So wrap under the needle tip, pull through, leaving a loop, and then go in on the opposite line, straight across, and then come up on the first line, and I'm coming up to the corner, so I'm going to make the hole slightly bigger so I come right out in the corner there. And then get hold of your tail with the needle through the cloth, snug up, wrap under the needle, pull through but not all the way through, and then into the loop, straight across on the opposite side. Now here my line's quite wide, so I could decide to just make a square in the corner and come out there. I hope you can see what I'm doing. So pull up my tail, snug it up, not too tightly, under the tip of the needle, leaving a loop. But now I want to change direction, I want to turn left. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just audition that open chain there. I'm going to put that needle in just like that, just to hold it open, and snug it so it's the right tension, and then put my thumb on it, and then I'm going to just couch over that stitch in that corner there. Do you see? So I'm just going to go down just outside the stitch just to hold that corner down, and then I'm going to come up in the opposite corner outside the loop, and then I'm going to couch that other corner down just with a tiny stitch. So I've just put my needle inside the loop, pulled it into place, and dive through to the back. And that would be the same if you're doing a straight line to finish off, or like now I want to change direction. Do you see? So it's now completely closed. It's closed at that end with that first stitch I did, and it's closed at that end with those 2 teeny tiny couching stitches. And so now I want to turn the corner, so I'll turn it, so I'm still working north, and then I want to come up on the left hand side of the line again. That's my starting point, and I'll start right next to, or you know, so it links up to my previous one, or even through it, doesn't matter. Pull right through, and then lay my loop away from me, and then I go down on the opposite side in a straight line, come up at an angle, leave my needle in the cloth, wrap under, pull through, leave a loop, and then jump across in a straight line, go down, move along a bit on the left, come up, leave the needle in the cloth, snug up, wrap under, pull through, leaving a loop. So in a straight line across and down, move myself along a little bit on the left, get hold of my tail, pull up, under the needle, oops, pull through, leaving a loop, and repeat. And then when you decide you've got to the end of your line, or you know, wherever you're filling in, do the same thing again. So I put my needle in, just stab through there, through the loop. Do you see? Snug that stitch up so the tension's right. Put my thumb on it, get the needle out again, and couch over here where the needle's coming out. So a tiny little stitch over the loop to hold it in place. And then I come up on the opposite side. Sorry about my thumb. Get my thumb out of the way. I come up on the opposite side, and then put my needle in that loop, pull it up into place, and go down in the same hole or just next to it, just to hold that stitch open and square, more or less square. It's all right. So that, I hope that is useful. If those people that are following on the Monday project, many of you, and I and as well indeed, had trouble with it. It's something about the fact that you have to start the next stitch before you finish the previous stitch. An alternative you could do is, if you really didn't like that, to get the same look, is you could do a blanket stitch. So I've come up there, I've turned it because I want to work now east. And then you go down on the opposite line, along a bit and down, and come up, just with the thread under the needle. And that's just a blanket stitch on the surface of the cloth. So now I'm going to move along and down to the opposite side and come up. And you're saying to yourselves now, what are you talking about, Catherine? That looks nothing like it. I'll just do another one. And then I'll couch that little corner down just by going through over the loop. And then you come up here on this little sticky bit. And then you just do a back stitch. So you go down there, come up on the next little leg, and then go down there. When I do backstitch, I often do a combination of backstitch and running stitch. So an actual backstitch, you go down there and then you come up way over there. But you get a great big long thing on the back then. I'd come back up through that same hole and then do that. And then do a running stitch. And then the next stitch, if I was going to join it up to here, why not? I come up and then I do the back stitch and so on. And obviously you could, I shouldn't have done that, I've got just enough thread I think. Come back up here and just feel the desire to close that off. So now if you look at them, I don't really think you would know that you'd cheated, in inverted commas. So if the open ladder chain really doesn't, you know, float your boat, if you really don't like it, do that instead. Maybe you'll like that better. Looks exactly the same. So shh, don't tell anybody. So that's the open ladder chain stitch. So now I've done some work on Mrs. Blue. So I'm going to just talk you through the border stitching and show you the different stitches, which will be in stages, because if I did all of it, it would be hours. What I've done here so far is all I've done, which I don't think you need to be shown, is do a running stitch around the chevron. Actually, the first thing I did was the chain stitch around this inner border, and I'll show you the chain stitch inside these motifs if you don't know. So that's just chain stitch, and then I've just done running stitch around the chevron and also around these little shapes. And I've tried to have the stitch and the space roughly equal. You know, I've tried. I haven't stressed over it. I've just tried and done my best. And sometimes I've been successful and other times I haven't. So what I did want to show you then is I've whipped the running stitches around the edge of these little thingamajigs. So I just wanted to show you that. So I'm working with 3 strands of floss just to make it a bit bolder. So I'm going to come up at the tip of this in the same hole as where the stitch came out of. Now you could have 6 strands of floss and just whip round once. I'm going to whip round twice with 3. I just find it easier than trying to pull 6 strands of floss through this cloth, which is quite, you know, sturdy. But now, so with the eye of my needle, I'm going under the running stitch and I'm going from the inside to the outside. You could go either way, but I've always done it inside outside, so I'm just being consistent, you know, on all the other panels. So I'm just going under the stitch and pulling it through, not too tightly, and then I go under the next stitch and pull it through, again not too tightly, and I'm just going to do that all the way around. And when I come to this stitch which is going in the other direction, I just kind of make sure that I put the wrap, the whips part of it, you know what I mean, this blue, right up under that end of the stitch. I've put this one a bit close to the chain, so I've got to be a bit careful. And then not pull it too tightly, so it sort of stays there somewhat, to make a pointy point. And if your thread gets twisted one way or t'other, just untwist it as you work. Can happen with this. So I'm going all the way back to the beginning. And then I'm going back under that first stitch. And again, because that's a point, just trying to make sure that my thread stays right down in the point. And then I'm just going to go round again. You can then whip in the other direction, which gives a sort of twisted look, but I'm just going to go round again in the same direction, just to thicken it up. So do you see, I've got 6 strands of thread laying there. You could have done it with 6 strands straight away. Or a thicker thread, you know, you can use, as long as you can get it through, you only have to come up and down once, so you can use quite thick thread as long as you can get it once through the cloth or twice through the cloth, and get all kinds of different effects. Now if you really want to be sure that that point stays in the corner, you could of course just go down to the back just to anchor it there, and then come back up again. A thread or 2 along, otherwise you'll just, you know, pull it back through. And then on you go. Until you get back to the beginning. a bit more thread through it. And then when you get back to where you came out, and I came out at the base of this stitch, you just go under the stitch first. That's the wrong end of the needle, Catherine. It's just easier with the eye of the needle not to split your stitches. And then, you know, I've pulled it up into the stitch again to get it pointy, and then I just go back down through that same place I came out, the base of that first stitch. There we go, and there's a little whipped running there. And the next thing I'm going to do is go round the chevrons again with a second colour. Find one where it's... See, on this one I've done red and gold. Can you see? So I've stitched with the red and then I've gone back and filled in with the gold. And I'm going to do that again on here because on these two I did blue and green. Blue and green, blue and green. So I need to get some gold. I'm just going to come up just under the edge of where I did that whip stitch thing. And then you just go down through this hole at the back of this red stitch and come up at the front of the red stitch. And if you find that hard or, you know, not pleasing, this is a really thick needle to do. You can also do it with a stab stitch, so you can just go down and then come back up. Sometimes I find it easier to line up if I do in and out, you know, two movements in with one movement. Sorry, if I do it in one movement, and other times I find it easier with stab stitch. And there's the corner done, and it gives a really nice effect, and you see it quite often used in traditional Cantor embroidery. This double running stitch it's called. So you get the idea of that, I'm sure. And you can really play with the different colours of thread. You could use different threads. You could even do the same colour but different thicknesses. So you could go one round with, say, 4 strands and then go around again with 2 strands. That might be interesting. But I mean, you're just doing running stitch, but you're doing it twice, and you know, just gives you options. So that's that. Okay, so I stitched until my gold ran out. And I want to show you these little flower motify things. So what I did was I came up about 1/8 of an inch in from the double running stitch and the chain stitch, sort of in this corner. You know, just somewhere, not directly next to it, but with a little gap. And then I went down in about the same place on the opposite corner, and that makes a great big long stitch. And then I came up somewhere in the middle of the triangle, bearing in mind I want to leave room to put a little knot there. And then I, with my needle, pulled this long straight stitch towards me a little bit, just to put a slight bend in it. And then I went down. So you kind of couch it down. And then I wanted 2 more little stalks in the spaces between, so I came up there, just by eye, and went back down in the same hole. And then the same on the other side, just by eye again. Back down through the same hole. And I'm going to come up over here ready for the next one. I'll just show you it once more. So the great long stitch across the base. And then come up some, and you want that stitched reasonably tight, you know, just so it lays on the cloth, not too, don't leave looseness in it because you're going to couch it, otherwise it will go loosey-goosey and then it might catch on things. Come up in the middle of the triangle, just with the tip of your needle, just pull it slightly towards you, just to put a little bend in it. And then go in between the 2 sides. So I'll carry on doing that all the way round, otherwise this will get in the way when I start doing the French knots, and I'll edit that out and then I'll come back and show you the French knots in case you haven't seen those before. So for the French knots I want them to end up being 6 strands thick each knot. So you could achieve that one of 2 ways. You could take 2 strands of floss in your needle and wrap 3 times. 3 times 2 is 6. Or you could take 3 strands of floss in your needle and wrap twice. 3 twos are also 6. I seem to have 3 strands here, so, and I think I've even mixed it up as I've gone along. If I've pulled a bit of floss and it was 2 strands, I've done 3 wraps, and if I've pulled it and it was 3 strands, I've done 2 wraps. It really looks the same to the naked eye, maybe under a microscope. Okay, so French knots, in case you don't know. I'm going to come up from the back where I want the knot to be, right on the end of that stalk. Try and keep my thumb out of the way. I'm going to turn it around, it's actually easier that way. And then I'm going to get hold of my thread where it's coming out of the cloth, and then I want to wrap 3 times, so I scoop with my needle rather than wrapping the thread. So 1, 2, 3. No, sorry, twice I said, didn't I? Because I had 3 strands. Doesn't matter which way you do it, as long as you remember. 2 wraps. So 1, 2. And then with that thread trapped around your needle, you go back in just next to where you came out, a thread or 2 of the cloth over. Put the needle in and leave it like that. And then you can gently tension up that thread. And at this point, if you don't know yet, you know, if you're just starting stitching them, you can have a look at the knot and you can kind of visualize how big it's going to be once the needle goes through. Now the important thing now is to hold that tail where it's coming out there with your thumb, and as you pull through to the back, keep hold of it until the very last minute, and then you can let go, and there's your little knot. So that's a French knot. So I shall go on and do those until this bit of thread runs out, and I'll come back for the chain stitch. Okay, so to do the chain stitch in these little motifs, I'm going to do gold because that's the only colour I haven't used yet here. So I'm going to do 2 rows of chain stitch in my light gold and then 2 rows in the middle in the dark gold. So chain stitch is a doddle after the open chain ladder chain stitch. So you just come up where you want to start. So I'm going to start right here in this point. Make sure your thread is going away from you to make a loop, and then you go down in nearly the same hole you came up, a thread or 2 to the side, so it doesn't pull right through. And you come out a little bit along, however long you want your chain to be. You make sure your thread is under the needle, and you pull all the way through. None of that leaving a loop nonsense. And then you go down again in nearly the same place where you came out, so into the loop of the chain, and move forward, you know, roughly the same distance. Make sure your thread's under the needle and pull through. And I'll just work my way around to the point to show you what I did to turn, you know, to turn and come back virtually the other way. Whoops. And this is what I did for the elephants themselves. I outlined them completely in the dark colour, I do think I said that, and then I went up and down in rows, really close together. Can you see? In between. So I just sort of followed the direction of the leg here and did that way. And then when I got to the trunk, I just followed the shape of the trunk. And then the head, I think I went that way, and the ear I went round and round. It's just, you know, look at the area where you're stitching and just decide what direction makes the most sense, really. One more into the point. Now, because I'm now going to change direction, sometimes if it's not too sharp an angle, it's okay to just go with it. Just turn and make the next one. Other times, depending on the angle, I find that that last stitch goes a bit funky, I think you call that in the States across the pond. So what I have been doing, just to be sure, is just anchoring that loop down just by taking my needle just outside the loop for a little couching stitch, just to trap it down, just to be sure, because it's a bag and it'll get used and you don't want things coming loose and getting snagged, and you know. And then coming back up in the same place, or just to the side, inside the loop, sorry, and then I go on. So I just took that extra little couching stitch just to be sure that last loop didn't come adrift. And then I work my way all the way around to there, and then I come up inside and worked another concentric row inside, and then I changed to my dark gold and did just a down and an up, and that was enough to fill in that little space in the dark gold. So once all that's done, and then I did chose a different colour for the stems on the outer edge and all the French knots, and that, you know, the chain stitch and everything. That's the outer border done. So the only other embroidery is these. So I think I will show you those now, and then leave next week for just the beads and the cantha, which is pretty straightforward. The cantha running stitch. And making the rice bag, because making the rice bag itself will take a little bit of time. So yes, I will show you the Shisha. So I've got this lovely glue from Helen, thank you Helen, which I've had since May and it's still going strong. And I've got somewhere some Shisha mirrors. If you don't have Shisha mirrors, when we did Shisha and Kutch inspired embroidery in the Monday project, some of us used bits of yogurt pot or bits of foil packaging, or you know, anything shiny really that you could make into a circle, a bead or a sequin, something like that. My friend gave me these little Shisha mirrors, actually from India. Some of them are a bit sharp, so you have to be careful. I'm going to get one out. So glue stick's not traditional. I don't think they use glue stick in Gujarat, but it does make it easier, especially when you're filming, you know, at your desk under the camera. So I just got make sure you get the non-shiny side, gave it a little smear of glue, not much. It's not holding it permanently, it's just holding it while I stitch it on. And then I just by eye put it somewhat central, and I just want to leave a little space in between the point of my petal. And there it is. And now I just have to work out what colour I'm doing them. So I've done gold, red and blue, so it must be green. Well, we've got more green because that's not going to be enough for all of them. Okay, I've been foraging about for bits of green and I've got these options. That is not enough. That's a bit light. I think I'm going to go for this one, which I think is the same as that, but it's a long distance away from that. Anyway, we'll go with this and we'll see how we get on. If we run out and we have to change greens, then we have to change greens. Okay, so I've got my green and my needle. I would say use the finest needle that you can get your thread through. It's just easier to get as close up to the mirror as possible when you're stitching. So I've got my Tulip 9, which I wouldn't normally use for 3 strands, but I think that is what I've been using. So the first thing you need to do is make some scaffolding stitches. So you come up, and I'm looking on the circle and I want to be about 1/3 of the way from the edge. If you're too close to the edge, when you come to make the actual stitches around, you'll pull the scaffolding off and your Shisha will pop out. So you want to be about there. I hope you can see when it's so shiny. You probably see better when the thread's on. It will seem in the beginning like you're too close to the middle, but once you start stitching around the outside, you'll pull, you know, it'll get pulled out. So it wants to be about there. Can you see? So I'm about 1/3 of the way over. It's winking at me now and blinding me. Can't see now, I can see spots before I can see Shishas before my eyes. And you want these to be firm. You know, you want to pull them up quite tightly. and then you come up, and now you're going to make stitches perpendicular. It's green, and green doesn't work with the word joke. I should have done it in purple. Anyway, you want the next stitch to be perpendicular to the first, and again about that third of a way in. So I'm going to come up somewhere here. Better too close to the middle than too close to the edge, because the worst that'll happen then is that where you see your shisha is a bit small, but that's better than it popping out, I think. And I always find it handy to turn it always, so I'm pulling the thread towards me. So then lay that on, go in, make sure you're still in frame, yes. Pull it quite tight, and I'm holding it at the back to keep the tension, the thread, as I come up to make the third one, and then I can turn it, whoops, and then that one's obviously just parallel to the first one and perpendicular to the second one. Can't resist. And then finally, sorry for my thumb, the fourth one. So now I've got this little crisscross holding it down, and then I do a second one at a 45-degree angle to that one. So I'm going to come up sort of halfway-ish between those two stitches there and pull it up tight. Pull some of the tail through. There we go. And then I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to go across and go down somewhere there. It doesn't really matter. You're just making structure. You won't see this. The main thing is get close enough to the middle of the shisha that you don't pull them out. You know, that the shisha doesn't pop out. See what I mean when I do the next thing, if you know what I'm talking about. So this second little 4-stitch cross just needs to be under something of an angle to the first one. 2, come back up behind. It's really difficult to do without putting my thumb in the way. Apologies. 3, I count them, otherwise you have to go back and work out how many you've done. That's the third one. Just pull them as tight as you can. You won't wrinkle the cloth because you're pulling against the shisha. If you've got something more flexible like foil or something like that, you might have to be a bit more careful. And that's 4. So then I've come through to the back, and that's my little, I hope you can see, hold it still, Catherine, my little scaffolding. Can you see? The trouble is I think you can see. So then you come up again, somewhere around the perimeter, as close to the mirror as you can. And then you work from the middle of the mirror to the outside. You slide your needle under and you pick up whatever threads are in your path to the outside. So sometimes it'll be two of your crosses, sometimes 3, sometimes, it'll vary. It doesn't really matter, but just I'm coming back out in a straight line to the outside of the mirror where I came out. And then do not pull these too tightly, because you don't want to pull all your scaffolding off the edge. So I'm now here. So then you need to take a tiny weeny stitch, working from the outside towards the mirror, perpendicular to it, like that. Can you see? And then my thread that's coming out from the mirror is behind me, that side of me, away from me. And then pull that through. And then again you go from the middle of the mirror where your little opening is, pick up whatever threads are in your path, slide under them, come out as close as possible to the previous stitch. Don't pull too tight, just let it lay. And then, keeping the thread away from you, make another tiny stitch next to the first one, And you can make these as close together and tiny as you like. That's more traditional, that they're all laying together. Or, you know, if the first few times you want to space them out a bit more, or, you know, just experiment. Fred hair is not optional in this house. Same again, do you see there, I'm just picking up whatever of those scaffold threads are in my path. Pulling through gently, gently, and then keeping that away from me. Taking a tiny bite towards the mirror. You could also take bigger bites and then you'll get rays. You know, your stitches will be much longer, like the sun. So, and you just keep doing that all the way around until you come back to the beginning. And so I'll do that and edit that out because you don't need to watch me do all that, and then show you how to finish off. Okay, I've come back round to the beginning. So I'm coming out of the cloth next to the mirror, so I just need to go in under the scaffolding for the last stitch. There's my previous stitch there. Do you see? I want to make sure I'm in front of it. Just fiddle about with your needle till you're in the right spot. And then you just simply, I lay my thread on to sort of audition where it's going to go, and just dive straight through to the back. There we go, and there's my little shisha in place. So then I'll just finish off on the back with a little back stitch. I normally go in behind the mirror there. And the final part of the sort of actual fancy embroidery is the lazy daisy and the straight stitch around the edge. Okay, so I've got myself some red. Now I did about 15 lazy daisies around the edge, and they're all different, more or less 15, sometimes 14, sometimes 16, but I just did it by eye. Now if you wanted to get a pencil and make yourself little marks, you know, where you wanted to put them, if you even wanted to measure, if that was more how you like to do it, then you go for it, but I'm just going to do it by eye. I'm going to start off here somewhere. Now, a lazy daisy is basically just a chain stitch sitting all on its own. So I'm coming through a little bit away from my shisha, making the loop, go back in nearly the same place I came out. So you have to cram that one in because it's very close to the edge. I've got the thread under my needle as for the chain stitch, and I get a knot, there we go, pull it through, and then just anchor that loop down with a little stitch over the top of it for a lazy daisy. And then I just space them, like I said, all the way around the edge of the circle. They're in the same place. Just get the tension right, trap it with a stitch. So I'll do the rest of those and then I'll just come back and, I mean, you know, straight stitch is straight stitch, but just for completion I'll just show you that. And then I'll talk a little bit about next week. Okay, so I've done my rather wonky lazy daisies. And I'm just going to do the straight stitches in between. I hadn't planned the straight stitches initially, just when I looked at it, it looked a bit unfinished. So all I did was, because here in the middle there's a bigger gap where the point of this would have come if it was more pointy. Actually, I happen to have blue in my needle, so I might just sort that out while I'm here. I didn't do the little extra stitch apparently. I'm just going to couch that down to make it a bit more pointy. That's better. So I did, there's hardly room, but I did a little V. I put my shisha way too close. So just 2 straight stitches in a V shape. And then I just went round in between the lazy daisies, just because I thought it needed something. So I started about level with the base of the lazy daisies, and then I made my stitch about half as long as them, so not the full length, just like a little accent in between, just like that, and I just did that all the way around. So So that was the embroidery. So next week, Wednesday, I will talk about the bead sewing on thereof. I'll show you this finished, obviously. I'll talk about the cantha running stitch for the background and, you know, how that's worked and so forth. I'll talk about finishing off the edges ready for the rice bag, and then I'll make the rice bag. So that's going to be another quite long one next Wednesday. I hope that's all right. Feel free, obviously, of course, to fast forward all the embroidery if you already know all that, but I wanted it all to be here in one place rather than sending you off here and there. I will link the Monday project, you know, with the Kutch embroidery, because I said I would, but you don't need to go and watch me and listen to me witter on for an hour and a half just to see how to do open chain. You just have to listen here to me witter on for however long it's been. Anyway, okay, don't stab myself on that. So thank you so much for watching. It's a little bit different for Wonky Wednesday, but I really wanted to share this with you, so this seemed like the best place to do it. Thank you for being here, and I look forward to you joining me next time for more cloth tales. Bye bye.